Hi there, it's Kevin with Deckbuilder.com here with one of my classic rant videos. It's been a while since I've done this, to rant about Standard, what has been going on in Standard, and try to give my arguments why I hate Kaladesh, and I hate Energy. I have been very critical of Mark Rosewater for quite some time. I think that most of the sets where Mark Rosewater is the lead designer in, the sets are not nearly as good as when he's either not involved or just helping out. And Mark Rosewater has been quoted in the past for having some very controversial opinions. I know he doesn't like instances. It's literally he's more of a fan of like the interactions of Dice Masters and Kaijudo, where everything is what we call split second, where you can't react to your opponents. And he's also not effective really, or he's also been notorious for making mechanics where you have a tough time interacting with those mechanics. One of them being Infect. Infect had very, very little ways to reduce Infect or just to punish Infect, and it was very, very easy to build these decks during New Phyrexia and before. They were just kind of all-in decks. If they did get their kind of miracle draw, there's nothing you could do, and they can dish off just so much damage so quickly. And again, Rosewater is notorious for this. And when Kaladesh came around, he couldn't help himself, built the Pummeler, which was very similar to that sort of thing, and then did not include one way to deal with Energy. So I want to make the argument that since the beginning of Kaladesh, Energy has led to two bannings, maybe not the broken combo necessarily. I'd actually say the Energy was just as much at fault as the broken combos themselves, because both the bannings with the cat, the Saheeli combo, as well as the Aetherworks Marvel, were really a problem with both like the Rogue Refiner and Attune with Aether being just too efficient for what they did, and other energy sources being just very efficient by having another game plan. Now, in my last video, I was very critical of Long Tusk Cub because Long Tusk Cub feels to me too much like Smuggler's Copter. It's one of those cards that allows a deck to be a mid-range control and aggro deck all in one, or at least a tempo mid-range and aggro all in one, because it's kind of the perfect card right now when you have such good payoffs with Energy, and you also have no way to really interact with your opponent's Energy. Save maybe Harsh Mentor is really the only card that can combat the Energy, and even at that, I don't think it's that great of a card to combat it. So you can look at both the Aetherworks Marvel shells and the Saheeli combo shells. Let's see if we can actually find an old deck of Felidar Guardian here. Sometimes they have some old ones for Energy, or we can look at kind of these Frontiers that are just chock full of Energy. So here's one that this was basically the deck that existed. This is funny, it's a Frontier deck, but it's still doing very well in the Frontier. But the Whirler Virtuoso, the Rogue Refiner, the Servant of the Conduit are all gaining this Energy. So if you don't have the combo, you can still kind of do this beatdown route with either the Whirler Virtuoso or like the Bristling Hydra was the card of choice back in the day. You can just pump a ton of energy into those and win the games that way. These combo decks also started to use Long Tusk Cub in them, as well as if they shut down the combo, you can still beat down with a insanely big Long Tusk Cub. I've shown in videos before that I'm so sick of the first turn of 2 with Aether and the second turn Long Tusk Cub, and then you have a 3/3 on turn 2 that you have to deal with, that if you don't deal with the turn, it becomes a 4/4. And if they cast on the following turn, cast like a Rogue Refiner, it already is going to be attacking in for 4/4, and then if you don't deal with it, it becomes a 5/5. And it's just so efficient to just keep pumping energy into a 2-drop. If you do answer it, whoop-de-doo. You've had to spend your turn killing their card and setting them up for more of a mid-range strategy. When we looked at the Marvel strategy, same thing. If we can find I'm sure this Frontier deck will be very similar to the one that was used back in the day. Well, this was a little more using more broken cards, but it's the same thing. They use like Servants, Whirler Virtuosos, Rogue Refiners, sometimes Bristling Hydras in the sideboard. And then if you shut down the combo, you would just have this really, really good mid-range deck. You'd have to put so much resources in stopping them from going Ulamog that then you just get beat down by the value of Rogue Refiner, Whirler Virtuoso, Long Tusk Cub, Bristling Hydra. All of them, a 4/3 for 4 mana that has the ability to give itself hexproof and be a 5/4. It just outclasses everything. A Rogue Refiner, it's hard to justify playing any 3-drop in Standard right now when Rogue Refiner exists, because it's a 3/2 for 3 mana that also draws you a card and gives you 2 energy. So it's going to trade with many other 3-drops. So think of like the Pala on the opposing Mardu vehicle sides. It will even kill a lot of like basically any other 3-drop that people are running at the time. It's going to be just the power on it's going to be big enough. If you have to use like a shock on it or an abrade or something like that, they still drew the card, got the energy, and it progressed their board. And it was really these type of support cards, the Virtuoso and the Rogue Refiner, and I put a Tune with Aether Long Tusk Cub in there, that enabled these two type of combos. I would assume that these would be too tough to play without the efficiency of one of these more mid-range creatures. And same thing with the Saheeli combo. They'd be more of those all-in combo decks that sometimes worked, but didn't have that other angle of taking over the game. And the same can be said when the Winding Constrictor energy. The Winding Constrictor definitely was a good +1/+1 counter, and then people started just going over to energy strategies because it allowed you to produce a ton of energy with the Winding Constrictor, of course, with the Cub and the Glint Sleeve Siphoner. The Constrictor produces more energy, and you just get to draw so many cards, and it's just a mess. You can see that the Cub, the Rogue Refiner, give this a very good strategy versus both aggro, mid-range, control, all of them as ways to just completely outvalue your opponents. So I consider myself a synergy fan. I've always been a fan of cards that interact with each other. If you look back at a lot of my deck lists over the time, I like to play these decks where I need to assemble pieces to win. I wouldn't call myself a combo player. I'd call myself a synergy player because I don't like relying on an all-out combo. I like having other ways to win the game. My most hated way to play Magic is what I like to call good stuff deck, where people just throw in. I'd say Sultai Energy is more synergy than at least Teamer Energy, but Teamer Energy is the big, and Mardu Vehicles before this too, very similar, those type of decks, is the big offender on what I like to call good stuff deck. And usually every format there's going to be one of these, and it's because Wizards does a terrible job, in my opinion, of really balancing cards. They always put 1 or 2 cards that are just strictly better than their counterparts, and we saw that poor Dinosaurs right now, and a lot of the cards as well from the Almanket block are just outclassed by the energy package. It's hard to justify running a 2-drop, a 3-drop, a 4-drop in green by going anything but the energy strategy. So of course this deck is miserable to go first from a Tune into Long Tusk Cub and a Rogue Refiner into Chandra, and it's tough. Into Glory Bringer after that. Very tough to beat those draws with any decks. And what makes this deck so good is it's just blanketly good against everything. It's good versus Ramen-Up. It's good versus Control. It's good versus... Teamer doesn't really have a terrible matchup. And what also gives Teamer, and what gives you such a headache, is you don't know exactly what flavor of Teamer you're playing against. Are they running Essence Scatters or Negates in the main? A lot of people do that. Are they running like the Confiscation Coups? Are they running black to splash in the Scarab God? And they just have this flex. Just the regular bulk of the deck is there, and then they can just play the other good stuff cards as flex slots because it's so versatile. And it's just one of those things that I hate how they printed this mechanic with no ways to deal with it. So Mardu was miserable to play against. I am under the impression that we can unban Smuggler's Copter, but Smuggler's Copter is just a bad design card, so I like it out of it. I don't think the Smuggler's Copter really warped the format. At the moment, we lost a lot of synergies with the Delirium strategies as well as the Madness strategies with Scrap Each Scrounger, and added just a plethora of answers for the Smuggler's Copter. It would, I think, give these kind of artifact unlicensed disintegrations a little bit of a boost, and maybe can start competing with Teamer Energy. One of the reasons why Mardu is nowhere to be found right now is Teamer Energy. That's one of Mardu's worst matchup, because they're hanging toe to toe with them, and even really now with, of course, a Braid and other cards that they've been able to print since then have not only do they stay toe to toe, but Teamer Energy gets that advantage of actually drawing the cards off the Rogue Refiner and just getting more value out of the cards, and having threats that are very tough for Mardu to deal with. Whirler Virtuoso is one of them, Bristling Hydra is one of them, even the Cub has to be answered. It's going to become bigger than what vehicles. So when a deck, I think, becomes even more of a problem than a deck that I think it still has all of the pieces there that everyone hated, me included, being the Mardu vehicles, we know we're kind of in one of those spots where I think that the standard metagame has now become unhealthy. And to back this up, we can look at Long Tusk Cub and Rogue Refiner being played in 35% of the decks. It's because if you combined all of the energy-based strategies, then that basically Sultai, Teamer, Jund, Green Black. There's Green Black is very obsolete now because Rogue Refiner just is easy to splash with the fast lands and whatnot. But if you combine all those together, it's 1/3 of them. When one deck archetype, one way to play the game is 1/3 of the metagame, you know you're in a problem. I think that's when I would definitely say that we're to the point where something needs to happen. I don't think that they can really do anything save ban a card to really stop the energy menace. It was just one of those oversights. Well, specifically, Mark Rosewater again said he didn't want people to be able to interact with energy. He wanted to be permanent. Once it came out, it was done with. And I mean, you can say again, Harsh Mentor or Solemnity or something like that theoretically could deal with it. Not really. And I don't think that the next sets are going to be able to really have anything to punish energy either, and we're stuck with this metagame, which is sad because I would really like to see some dinosaur decks. I'd really like to see some pirates, and I know we do get a full another set coming out with the Rivals Vixlon, which is going to be a smaller set though, and typically smaller sets need to have some really good cards to push those over the top. But I have a hard time even seeing those type of cards competing with energy, and if they do, then we're in a world of hurt next rotation, because if they outclass what energy is trying to do, then we're just in a whole nother pickle for the set that comes out after that. So I don't know. It's just kind of a headache for me. I hope I've kind of put my thoughts together. Let's just look at the format really quickly for standard. And you can see the Teamer Energy itself is up to 25, and Soul Tider is up to 7. That's 31%. If you start finding these other decks that this is still a Soul Tie Energy here. And you can go down these lists too. So even Wizards they've been trying to hide the statistics by forcing that 5 different deck lists with 5 different archetypes happen. You still see very similar archetypes happen, like this UG deck and this URG deck. Both of these are, and even the Jund Energy. So 3 of them here are very, very similar. We have Bristling Hydra Rogue Refiner. This is a Pummeler version of it. Then we have the black. This is actually Soul Tie. It was just misclassed. Glint-Sleeve Siphoner. We have Consigned to Oblivion. We have Pummeler in this one too. It's funny how a lot of people are actually going more of the all-in route with Larger Life and Pummeler. Probably for Mirror's sake. Mirror's sake, it's a way just to push through when the board gets so stalled. Yeah, this is kind of an interesting little list as far as Consigned to Oblivion Cartouche. So making your opponent return a blocker so the Pummeler can go through. Cartouche can make it kind of unblockable. Cartouche seems pretty good on Long Tusk Cub here too. Yeah, kind of cool innovation. But innovation aside, it's still the same old boring, I would say 16 cards here of Cub, Servant, Rogue, Bristling Hydra. I mean, these are the packages of every one of these decks. Cub, this one doesn't have, yep, Cub, Servant, Bristling Hydra, and this one does not have a Rogue Refiner because they're going into the more of the black strategy, but those are all still there. It's either answer Cub or die to it, and I hate those type of formats when they print those specific cards that are that good. All right, so if we come over here to some of these other ones, like we have a Teamer Energy here. There are probably a number of Teamer Energies that actually, if you actually go over to the competitive standard match and you look at these undefeated trophies, I know this F-Noop was on the Ramming Up Red, and I think Jabberwocky was on Black Blue Control, but he switches decks around. When you start picking up some of these other names here, a lot of these are on the Teamer Energy because it's just such a good blanket strategy versus the meta right now. So again, it gets kind of sad too. Like approach decks are coming back and to kind of deal with these Teamer Energies, but none of them have been a very good answer. And I don't know. Wizards is in kind of a weird position because I think if you would actually look at win percentage, Teamer Energy here would be a great opportunity for MTG Goldfish to actually be able to publish the data of matchup percentage, win percentages, and overall win percentage. I would say Teamer Energy is probably just slightly above win percentage wise. Again, it didn't do that well versus at one of the Pro Tours when a lot of people were on Ramming Up Red, but it's also because the Teamer Energy really wasn't prepared for Ramming Up Red, which makes me shake my head because there's a lot of things Teamer Energy can do to punish Ramming Up Red. So anyway, that's kind of my spiel I don't know. I don't know how to go forward with. I think they are hiring more testing, and was energy that bad? I mean, it was a key focal point of their. I know it didn't hit the gates that quickly when Kaladesh was came out. It really did take Aether Revolt to push energy over the top, with like Rogue Refiner and some of the cards that went with it. But Aetherworks Marvel was good right off the gates. The Saheeli combo did end up being good once the other piece was printed, of course, in Aether Revolt. But I think that because of those two decks, it sped up people's ability to really play around with these energy cards and see that they are just so superior to everything else you did. I think the early energy decks that came out the gates were like red-green energy, and they're trying to be more aggressive rather than more resilient. And they're easier to shut down with like the board wipe type strategies, where Teamer Energy is just a mess with a lot of cards that just can recover and win the game. Chandra, Rogue Refiner, Glorybringer, all those cards. So anyway, that's my kind of spiel with it. Again, and this doesn't come from a place that I have a problem with Teamer Energy. My last few decks that I've played, I believe, have gone like 3-2 in my last matchups. Like this was a 3-2 with the God Pharaoh's Gift. Like I'll show you the deck, and I played it 3 times. 3 of those decks were energy decks. So let's go back to it. How do I go back to it? So did I close this? Okay, closed it. Okay, so this one was Teamer Energy. I lost 1-2. Games 2 and 3 are miserable. This was an approach. This was approach. This is green-black energy, and this was Teamer Energy. So again, this was out of this particular league that I played. There were 3 Long Tusk Cub serving the conduit kind of shells, attuned with Aether shells, and 2 approach, which I'm guaranteeing the approach decks are just trying to feed on. Are they good versus Ramen-Up? I don't know how well approach does versus Ramen-Up. But as you can see, my deck just completely wrecks approach. Approach is very, very, very bad against the combo deck here. They can't keep up with my amount of card. I'll just show you one really quickly how they kind of progress with the game, because they can gain so much life. There's 2 ways you can win versus approach deck. You can mill their approach with Minister, which I've happened a lot. You just have to count the cards that they're at, and then just try to mill it. And the other way is you can just outvalue them. And the Scrappy Scrounger addition to this deck really made this deck a lot better. And it just, you can see that the hands that my opponent had in these games, I don't think were very bad. They're typical. They're kind of slow to get out off the bat, but get in for some early damage. Start to self-mill myself to try to find that gate. And again, like I didn't even have the greatest draw here. I was kind of frustrated here, milling that gate, not finding the cards in the graveyard. And see, like farm, not a very good versus Scrap Heap. Get the Glint Nest. Find stuff. Now I've got this 3 damage per turn. My opponent can't just sit back and do nothing. I could start milling myself. I find 2 Scrap Heaps here, and we can just kind of go the Scrap Heap route of grinding them out. And again, my opponent just is too kind of slow to interact with this. It puts him in a weird position too, because the next game he brought in like Fumigates, or no, he had Fumigates in, but brought in like more control like this. And these are just terrible cards versus a deck that can eventually just, like, here's a tapped out Marionette Master. Here we can put it on the servos. Tack in. Do you have a Colossus in the deck? I can't remember if this is how we won. No, we don't. Oh, we have Walking Ballista. He would have been down to a 1 if I would have cast the other Walking Ballista. But this just puts my opponent in a miserable position. And, you know, gate here. So my opponent has the chance to, okay, do I counter this gate or do I deal with the things attacking in? And it doesn't matter because the Walking Ballista just kills my opponent there. So anyway, that wasn't the best matchup there, but there are 2 approach decks in a row. I shake my head at my opponent on game number 2 with where'd it go? We'll have to find it. But game number 2 of approach, he brought in like the cat combo, and that was so bad. Brought in the 30 consoles and cats. And so my opponent had a bunch of cats, and all my things came into play tapped. And sided out Fumigates and things, and it was just my opponent just didn't have a way to win the game at that point. I mean, it was they had to rely on the approach, and it was just wasn't wasn't going to get the job done before I comboed off. So anyway, yeah. Where was I going with this? Teamer energy, though, I mean, 3 out of, like, I lost, I won 1 out of 2 that time, but the league before, it was 4 teamers and 1 ramen up, and I won 3 out of 4 of those teamer matchups and beat the ramen up matchup. And I think the one before, which was a 3-2, I went 2-1 versus the teamer variants and lost versus a ramen up and lost versus a Abzan tokens or something similar to that. And so again, I'm not necessarily saying that Teamer Energy is just this oppressive deck. It's just boring and, in my opinion, bad design. And to me, that's just as bad as oppressive. When the game becomes unfun and redundant, that is just as bad. And the Teamer Energy mirrors. Have you ever played those? Who can draw the most Glorybringers or Chandras in succession? Oh, those are miserable. Anyway, that's my rant for the day. This has been Kevin with RogueDeckbuilder.com. Thanks for watching.